Joining us, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott. Attorney General Abbott, welcome back to Houston's Morning News. Thanks for taking the time this morning.
Great to be back, Matt.
Listen, good news for a lot of us. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Georgia has struck down the individual mandate part of Obamacare. What does this mean for the state of Texas?
Well, it means a lot for the state of Texas, who was one of the states who participated in this win. It means even more for the citizens of the state of Texas, because this is a big victory, not just legally, but it's a big victory for liberty, for limited government, and for people's pocketbooks. If this ruling is upheld at the United States Supreme Court, it means that people will not be forced by the government to go out and purchase health care insurance. They can if they still want to, but they're just not required to make that purchase. And it will also mean that taxpayers of the state of Texas will be paying less to the government to build out the infrastructure that will pay about $10 to $20 billion for the first 10 years of the implementation of this law. So it'll be a net savings, more money in people's pocketbooks, but also less governmental intrusion into their lives.
Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott joining us here this morning. And, Mr. Abbott, I'm going to ask you to hang on here because I have a question. You know, the individual mandate was put into this thing, the way I understand it, so that it could be paid for, because without people actually buying the insurance or being forced to buy the insurance, there was no way to pay for this monstrosity that is known as Obamacare. So when we come back, I'm going to ask you what this means going forward to Obamacare in general. They certainly only struck down the individual mandate, but how can the rest of this ugly beast languish if we don't have that individual mandate? We'll come back and get Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott's answer to that question in just a second.
Now, back to Matt and your morning news.
KTRH News Time is 7:22. We're going to continue to take your calls on the red light cameras and the resolution to remove them. Also, Governor Perry's run for the presidency. But joining us, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott. And Attorney General Abbott, thanks so much for your time this morning. We sure appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So if we don't have the individual mandate, which was knocked down by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, how do we pay for Obamacare? Because, Greg, this was how the president suggested we pay for this thing. If we force everybody in, then we've got the money there and it brings costs down. At least that's what he said. I never believed it when he said it. So now that we're not going to force people, or if this holds up, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling holds up, how do you pay for this monstrosity?
Well, Matt, you're exactly right, and you make a good point. And just to give you the background here, the Court of Appeals struck down the individual mandate component that forces everyone to buy insurance, but upheld the remainder of Obamacare. So what is the result of that, as you ask? The answer lies in the words spoken by Barack Obama's lawyers in the courtroom in the Court of Appeals, where they said that if the individual mandate is stricken down, the remainder of Obamacare would fail, because all of it stood upon and rested upon the payment mechanism and the enforcement mechanism in the individual mandate. So bottom line is, this one ruling striking down the individual mandate should be sufficient for the entire Obamacare law to fail.
And this has got to go to the Supreme Court for it to be completely, struck down, correct? I mean, this all rests upon the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. And again, that is stretching the Commerce Clause to its bounds. And what they are saying here is that you can't use the Commerce Clause to force people to buy something they don't want.
Well, you're exactly right. What the Court of Appeals decided is that there are outer bound limits to the Commerce Clause, which is the constitutional provision that Congress rested this law on. And in this case, Congress exceeded those outer bounds, went beyond it, went beyond the power they were given in the Constitution. As a result, the law is unconstitutional. But there is a conflicting Court of Appeals decision out of the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. What that means is the Supreme Court needs to take this case to resolve a conflict amongst different courts of appeals. We hope to get it up to the Supreme Court within a couple of months, so the decision could be rendered by the end of next June.
Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott joining us here this morning. All right, I got about 30 seconds here. I got to ask you, Greg, you happy about Perry throwing his hat in the ring?
for one, I am happy about Perry's run. As the Attorney General working with him for the past 8 years, I know from the inside that he is a person who is going to pull the plug on these job-killing regulations. He will get America back to work. He will create thousands of jobs around the Houston area, but millions of jobs across the country, which is the economic stimulus this country so desperately needs. He's the right man for the job at this time, and I think he can and will win.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate it. Attorney General Greg Abbott joining us here this morning.